It is that time, the Apex Legends Season 17 Legend tier list to better let you know who you should be using and who's the best in Apex when it does come to their overall power, team capabilities, and killing potential. There are nearly a quarter of 100 legends in Apex, and for me, there truly are no bad legends, which would be the F tier or dumpster fire legends. However, we do have one that is definitely underwhelming in the D tier, and it is going to be Revenant. As with all legends, it always comes down to the player to make the most of their legend and increase their viability, but for Revenant, he is a bit too positional and situational dependent. The big problem for Rev is his ultimate ability. Not only does it have a super long timer, it's pretty weak unless you are playing with the perfect squad comp, have that right positioning, and there is not a third party nearby. There's so many variables that can go wrong with it that oftentimes you may be better just to not use the ability. I will give credit where credit is due and say that the tactical silence is pretty insane for quick clutch plays where movement legends are trying to escape and you do end up locking them down. Also, the passive of higher climbing is quite nice to make plays from angles that really no one ever expects, but the limitation to this is that you need very specific positioning and fighting locations that you won't always have. The last time Revenant saw any sort of love was July of 2021, almost 2 years ago, and I could see some buffs coming during the mid-season, so stay tuned. Moving on, we have the C tier legends, which are those who are fine or okay. The first is someone who has gone up and down tier lists more than most, and it is going to be Caustic. My list is not specific for ranked or pubs, but if I had to pick a legend who is kind of just meh right now for general play, it would be Caustic. That being said, if you are a ranked player, I'd move him all the way up to B tier as he does have a lot of ways to slow engagements down and live longer, but for killing power, team support, and just overall viability in the meta of Apex, there's not much Caustic does that other defensive or assault legends can't do a lot better. At the end of it, he just doesn't fit the overall playstyle of Apex Legends. The gas grenade ultimate can be used aggressively as well as supportively for the team, but its crazy long timer limits your possibilities, which means Caustic's gas traps is kind of where it all starts and ends for him. And if you're comparing this to Watson's fences or Catalyst's fortification of doors, there's a bit more defensive and supportive options or playmaking potential with those two legends. Second to Caustic is a borderline B legend at C+, and this is Ashe. For me, Ashe is kind of in an odd spot. 2/3 of her kit really is not needed, and they don't do much to actually make a difference. The other third, the third that works quite well, is her ultimate ability, the Phase Breach. The ultimate is one of the most flexible, aggressive abilities you can get in Apex, making it very versatile for a lot of scenarios. As for her tactical, it did receive a buff this season, but it doesn't really change engagements unless you are at a very specific range of not too close, while also not being too far to make use of it, and even then, it still isn't great. As for Ashe's passive, while it is very nice to see where players are dying and ping death boxes mid-fight, these two abilities don't influence much in terms of actual gameplay or usefulness. The passive is more or less just a convenience tool in pubs to find out where fights are, and in ranked, you can mostly just have solid game sense and map awareness to achieve the same thing. Ashe is a fine legend, but overall, I think she's a little redundant and just not necessary right now. There are a lot of legends in the B tier of good and sometimes viable when you are comparing them to the traditional meta of Apex. First is Mirage at a straight B tier. Mirage did see a nice couple little quality of life buffs last season that were nice for those that already played him, but overall, Mirage really isn't that insane legend. He is not going to have much usefulness in platinum or higher ranked or pushing those crazy high kill pub games, as Mirage just doesn't really have the kit for this. Mirage's passive of reviving is honestly one of the more underrated revives in Apex, but the times this ability will actually be useful in a way that it matters is going to be very few. As for the tactical, it still needs some buffs to make it a little bit more usable. Getting the tracker indications when decoys are shot is very nice to make plays. However, the ultimate is really going to be the saving grace for Mirage, as a 60-second ult to just clutter and confuse the battlefield is very useful. One thing to note is that he is also now a support legend, which is definitely a straight buff to him. If you do want one of the most unique combat experiences that Apex has to offer and you want to make players feel kind of dumb when you kill them, there is no one better. My previous main and one of my favorite legends in the game who is misunderstood 14 seasons after his release is going to be Crypto. Much like Caustic, I also give Crypto a much higher rating rating of around A to A+, if you are solely using him for ranked Apex, as Crypto has a ton of use cases for ranked players. At a basic level, you can use his drone to recon areas and scan enemies, but the amount of ways you can use this to your advantage is kind of just wild. This is exaggerated in ranked play when you have some downtime to hop into the drone to locate third parties, find out where to rotate to, remotely ping survey beacons, which is massive, see who is nearby via the signs, use the drone remotely in fights, and support the team through instant respawns and grabbing their cars. A Crypto EMP is huge for farming Evo shield damage, using enemies' resources, and overall being a menace, while also having something that is very good to make aggressive push plays or self EMP plays if you are getting thirded. If we do put all this praise to the side, Crypto doesn't really fit the fast-paced movement of Apex, which does result in him being ranked maybe a little bit lower than the potential he does have. A legend who does get a slight bump from the previous season is going to be Mad Maggie, also at B tier. Maggie is a pretty decent legend at creating avenues of opportunity, which isn't always the easiest thing to have happen. I do think her passive of tagging and seeing where enemies are through the walls and the shotgun speed boost is mostly forgettable when you are looking on its own, but if you combo in the tactical drill, this combo of forcing movement and being able to track their movements actually does lend for a very nice and aggressive playstyle that can be pretty good for a pub player. As for her ultimate, this ability is also decent for making some aggressive plays or quickly escaping. Mad Maggie gets a little boost from last season because of that map rotation of KC, Edge, and Olympus, all lend very nicely to closer range fights and push plays, which inevitably is going to be good for Mad Maggie. Overall, if you want a good assault legend and aggressive legend, she ain't bad, but there's still going to be better choices. The first B+ legend is the OG healer of Lifeline. Like a few legends before her, Lifeline can be rated higher or lower depending on the play environment she is in. It took an eternity, but we now have her ultimate care package feeling actually viable. The passive reviving has really always been good, and that is still the case today. It's one of the best abilities in the game to actually clutch up plays. I think the part that gets slept on the most is her tactical healing drone, as healing and fighting is crazy OP, and this combo can be used a ton during your matches. The big reason I did drop Lifeline a singular rank from A to B+ for this season is really that she is super dependent on how you play and your skill level. Lower skilled players will benefit more from Lifeline, as their lobbies will have players that simply won't be able to deal with the reviving players as quickly as you need to, whereas a skilled player, say Platinum or above, really should be able to counter this Lifeline revive quite easily. If you are a newer or less skilled player, I think she's one of the best characters you can use, as she is very supportive of the team with little skill required. The most recent movement legend or recon legend of Vantage is up and is also at the borderline A tier of B+. Vantage is a pretty unique legend when it comes to her playstyle, as there really isn't anyone else in the game that mixes movement with her tactical, assault properties with her ultimate sniper, and recon capabilities with her passive. Because of this, Vantage definitely has some use cases in all modes of Apex, but she doesn't necessarily do any one of these parts of her game better than other legends, which does leave some things to be desired. Her ultimate can two-tap enemies, which is nice, and that tactical bat of Echo is really solid to close the gap to get angles or to assist with this playstyle. As for her passive, I think it's probably the most underrated part of her kit, as being able to see how many players are left on a team and their shield rarity is actually OP to make better plays. That being said, Bloodhound or Seer are still going to be the better legends for ranked Apex, and someone like Horizon and Pathfinder is probably better for that pub play movement. But if you are looking for a very unique playstyle and a pretty versatile one, Vantage is a pretty good pick. For a number of seasons now, certain legends have been climbing the ranks, becoming more and more viable. That is not the case for Octane though. Octane drops one rank from the previous season to B+, but this doesn't mean he is bad. Octane's set of abilities allows him to play a very free-flowing playstyle, and it lets players focus on their gun skill, which is definitely the most critical part of anyone's game. The passive health regen means you can focus more on moving and dishing out damage, whereas his tactical stim also lets you focus on making plays to close the gap or escape areas with a little bit more urgency. The ultimate launchpad is really the thing that is carrying his kit though, as it's the only part of Octane's set that lets him have some sort of team viability, and its quick 90-second timer definitely means you can make more frequent rotate plays or movement plays on enemies. There's not a lot to say about Octane 17 seasons after his release. Much like many of these other middle ground legends, he's good in some scenarios, but it's hard to recommend launching 80 meters on an Octane pad when there are many other movement ability or rotation abilities that can travel much further and with a lot more flexibility. Watson is a great legend, and she has been for a long time, but her general playstyle leads herself a little bit more being a ranked legend than a pub legend or a general play legend. Fencing and blocking up areas is incredible for taking space and grinding out that placement in ranked, which will be needed this season. Not to mention, I think the map rotation might help her just a little bit, as the 3 maps have a lot of areas where her fences are going to be very usable. Her ultimate pylon is also incredible to defend the team, but something that I don't think most associate with Watson is her being a support legend. Her ultimate pylon is definitely this though, as you can regen the squad shields quite quickly. If you want a legend who is probably the best legend to grind rank, then she is my pick, but if you want a more traditional Apex experience, I don't think she is the best for this. I'll also say that Watson is definitely one who benefits from good team play, as team coordination is critical in Apex Legends. We all know playing solo with randoms is absolutely not great. Hop into my community Discord, I'd love to have you. You can also ask me any Apex questions that you might have. The legends who can be considered mostly meta or absolutely amazing are those in A tier, and there are quite a few of them, as Apex for the most part is very fitting to many different playstyles. Maybe not the most fun legend out there, but someone who continues to be extremely viable in the meta of Apex is going to be Gibraltar. Gibby has a very old school playstyle and is a little bit dated, but his 3 abilities lend very nicely to being an absolute unit and powerhouse legend. I think Gibby in my mind is closer to being a B tier legend than an S tier legend of these days, as he is just a little bit too old school. The passive gun shield though is very nice to save shield cells and soak up unnecessary damage. The tactical dome shield is great for many scenarios, as it is probably the most versatile ability in the game. And then Gibby's ultimate bombardment is extremely deadly and can 200 to 0 someone if they are being ignorant of its power. But if you want arguably one of the best one-on-one legends in a fight, Gibby is kind of crazy, as the red Evo shield fortified Gibby with a gun shield can oftentimes play like a legend with more than 300 health. Returning to her A tier placement is going to be none other than Loba. Loba remains my preferred recommended legend if you are looking for someone who is the easiest yet most useful legend for the skill required to execute with her abilities. Loba's passive is kind of weak, as seeing loot through walls does lose its usefulness after the drop, but even then, being able to increase your chances of survival during the drop by seeing that gold or purple armor can be pretty critical. Having movement with her bracelet is definitely a great thing to have, and being able to reposition while staying completely in cover is something that is very nice and definitely unique to her. It is going to be, however, that premier ability of the black market that does make her shine. Being able to loot quicker in the early game means more pub fighting and less time looting, which also means getting better faster. Loba is an amazing legend and definitely worth getting if you are looking for one of your first legends to unlock. Much like Loba, Rampart also has been getting a lot more notoriety lately due to how she is capable of creating something literally out of nothing. In a game where cover is so important, can be a literal lifesaver. And boosting your outgoing damage through them is really just a nice perk on top of this. I do think her passive of the enhanced reload and mag size for LMGs though is mostly forgotten, as you really aren't using LMGs these days, as they're just not meta. Most people are using assault rifles or SMGs. As for the ultimate, the minigun, I find it's more of a useful third-party ability that you can use to apply pressure on teams that are already fighting, as it can go absolutely crazy with its damage output. With that being said, I would consider her ultimate more as a resource or a tool rather than a killing machine, using it to cover fire, break doors, breach into areas, stop enemies cover. This is where her ultimate I think really does shine. Rampart is a slightly better ranked legend, but if you want someone that is a very tactical legend to play and who is all about getting angles with her walls, she's very good for an intelligent Apex player. Another legend who is going to greatly benefit from this season's map rotation is going to be Callus, also at A tier. Callus, in my opinion, is the most free-flowing and viable of the defensive legends that can be used in a very hybrid-esque playstyle between being aggressive and defensive. This is because of her passive of fortifying doorways is very good, and most importantly, very quick to use, letting teams get nearly instantaneous relief. Similarly, the tactical traps can also be used to cover greater area and force movement on players, not to mention that the trap just activating is a nice signal that someone is actually just really close to you. Then there is Callus Wall, which I find has been proven for a little while now that it is a huge playmaker to cross open areas or take fights on enemies. I am ranking Callus in all these legends really more or less on her own, as this season she does get a non-legend related nerf where Cirrus scans can't be seen through the wall anymore. But if hybrid play is your thing, Callus is a really great option. A legend who used to combo pretty nicely with Catalyst is going to be Seer, who I also rank at A tier. Seer has seen the gambit of changes over the seasons, but has fallen in a fairly good spot, I think, depending on who you're talking to. Seer is really that #1 recon legend if you are looking to play together as a well-coordinated team and you are looking to take a lot of fights. His ultimate is the main reason for this, as seeing where everyone is in a certain area is really just a busted way to make sure you are making smart plays. Likewise with this, if you get a knock on an enemy, being able to follow up with the tactical scan to keep enemies out of commission or stop that healing item is going to give you more time to make the play. These abilities alone are enough to give Seer the A rating, but then you also throw in the fact that he can't see at any times who is around him with his hands, just means you're going to have better awareness. At the moment, I'm not ranking Seer any higher, even though he is in the amazing tier, but this is because as an individual character, I don't think Seer is as strong as some other legends when it comes to killing power or team support. Next up is the brand new Ballistic. Time will really tell as to where Ballistic shakes up, but there is no doubt about it, and jumping right into it, Ballistic's tactical can be pretty busted. If you get hit by this thing in a close range fight, you are truly out of commission and or at a huge disadvantage, as you're gonna take a minimum 50 damage if you want to fight your enemy. I do think the damage is way too strong, and you could drop that 30 extra damage off, and I think it would be more or less okay. That being said, hopping into Ballistic's ultimate is also quite good for yourself and the team to run enemies down. I have been fond of using the Prowler as its reload is incredibly fast, and the 35 round mag is actually unbelievable if you are fighting a lot of people at once. I actually think for the most part, the third weapon in the sling is kind of just meh, and for the most part, it's really just an enhancement for that ultimate ability. In general, I find it rarely to be useful, but experimenting with stuff like a Peacekeeper or maybe a Wingman where you really don't need a lot of attachments isn't too bad. But for the most part, you really want something like an R9 or a Prowler, maybe a Devotion or Havoc in that sling spot. And when these guns don't have any attachments, there's not too much usefulness with them until you're in your ultimate. I do think people are overhyping and overreacting when it does come to Ballistic's overall power, just because that auto lock-on hacking pistol. But at the end of it, he is still very good and is definitely worth using. I would absolutely use him right now before he probably gets a little bit of a nerf. Our final straight A tier legend is going to be none other than good old Fusey. Fuse for me has been a solid legend for a while now and maybe is a little forgotten about. He has many capabilities when it does come to needing to be aggressive and apply pressure on a number of teams at the same time, whether it's that ultimate mother load to zone off enemies and cause massive damage, the tactical knuckle cluster to provide constant pressure or constant relief, and then you got the passive of the Grenadier to have stacks on stacks of nades to dispense at a moment's notice and completely scatter the enemies. Again, the map rotation this season is absolutely going to help Fuse, as the smaller maps lets him shine a little bit more, and the increased use of the defensive legends like Rampart and Callus also means his clusters are going to have increase in viability. The one thing that Fuse is missing is that true supportive nature, but what he does lack in team usefulness is going to be made up with a myriad number of ways to take engagements. Fuse only slipped slightly in my rankings from last season, as I think the A+ I gave him was a little bit too generous last season, as there's more legends that are a little bit more useful or meta than he is. One of those useful legends is going to be Bloodhound, and the first A+ legend at the start of Season 16, I definitely went way too hard on the Hound, as they are still incredible, but in a different way than they once were. Bloodhound really went from a pure recon and scanning based legend to a legend who is more about aggressive playmaking and tracking. This makes Bloodhound almost even better than they once were for general pub play and fighting. I do think they still are not as good as they once were if you are playing ranked, as just having more scans is just way more useful in a team combat scenario, as wall hacks are hacks. Either way, the newer passive of scanning that Raven to get 25% of an ultimate recharge and going into a literal killing frenzy with that speed boost makes for a deadly and unbeatable combo. Bloodhound, in my opinion, is the best recon legend you can use in a casual sense, but I do think Seer's skill level or maybe potential might be able to go just a little bit higher, but again, it's team dependent. If you want one of the best pub or solo legends these days, and if you are brand new to the game, I think Bloodhound is probably the best legend you could use. Pathfinder is also at A+. Last season's buffs of the zipline, both in the distance traveled and speed, plus the passive buffs of getting free zips, really makes Pathfinder one of the best rotational legends in the game. Not to mention, Path was already a really good combat legend with his tactical grapple. The grapple for me still reigns supreme as one of, if not the best movement abilities in the game for literally anything, as it can be used in any play area to make quick knock plays or quick getaways, and it contains non-linear movement, meaning it's much harder to counter than say a Horizon lift. However, I can't stress enough how critical Pathfinder's passive is to his overall success as a movement and rotational legend. Dropping your first zip, looking at a care package, getting another zip, going an additional 150 meters, and then pinging that second care package means you can travel a crazy 500 meters in mere seconds, which does open up a ton of playmaking possibilities. Do not sleep on Pathfinder because right now he really has the complete set of abilities to perform both as an entry fragger and rotational legend. The only thing keeping Path from S tier is going to be his massive and refrigerator-like size, which I think is a fair counter. Now up our final A+ legend, but do me a huge favor and hit that like button and drop a massive smiley emoji if you are still here, and comment down below what legend you think needs to get buffed as soon as possible. We all know it's probably Revenant. Slipping a single ranking spot for me this season is going to be Wraith. Wraith is still an amazing and incredible legend, but I don't see her as an instant must-have pick, which I think the S tier legends more or less are. Her passive is kind of just forgettable. The tactile is really where she gets most of her fighting capability, as resetting fights and letting her go back again and again for more fighting opportunities or scouting opportunities is so good to have, as any ability that lets you have a get out of jail free card is just a win. The portal buff of last season I think is incredible, but at the same time, not necessarily better or worse than other rotational options like Pathfinder or Valkyrie. The one thing I will say is that if you are a ranked player this season, I do think Wraith is still an S tier option, as the smaller maps of KC and Olympus lend her portal to getting increased viability, since you won't really need that Valkyrie ultimate as often. Not to mention, you can just slot in an evac tower now if you want this Valkyrie-esque rotational capability. Either way, Wraith continues to be an amazing legend with one of the smallest hitboxes that will also help her win more one-on-one fights. The legends who I deem to be insane meta and top tier good are those in S tier, and this generally is reserved for the legends whose entire set of abilities are useful for winning more of your fights and matches. For the first time ever, we are going to start off with Bangalore in the S tier ranking as a legend who just narrowly made this tier, but she does have a ton of viability in the current meta of Apex. But when I say near, I flip back and forth a dozen times as where to rank her. Truly, there is no other legend who has more hybrid capabilities with a simple tactical of the smokes. It is something that can be used for a lot of scenarios, and the main thing going for it is to create cover. But if you as a Bangalore and or your teammates get a digital threat, this combo still remains one of those combos that is unmatched in fights. Bangalore's ultimate of the Rolling Thunder is also great to create rotation options or create relief when you need it the most. Even if this was the end of her kit, she would be pretty good, but you throw in the passive speed boost to cross areas and get away quickly, which means she has even more ways to survive fights. Bangalore really just has it all, and it's kind of odd how the meta of a game can shift over time without you even having an update to a specific character. This is because of new movement tech, strategies that are developed, new characters that come into the game that complement the legend, and new ways of thinking and playmaking. Also, nerfs to other legends will make certain legends a little bit better. Truly though, the game is just evolving. Second to bang is going to be someone who lives and breathes the meta of Apex Legends, and this is Horizon. Many people freaked out at the start of last season as she lost the ability to shoot with 100% accuracy in her lift, but I knew Horizon was still going to be one of the most picked legends because her power really always lied in her movement capabilities and not necessarily her offensive shooting ability in the lift. Horizon for me is the poster legend for those who want to experience what makes Apex great. Her tactical lift has both that aggressive movement to fly straight into a fight or that elusive movement to escape and reset all while you heal up. Her black hole has lost some steam, but it still can be enough to distract enemies while you shoot them in the side, which is really all that matters. From previous seasons though, it is going to take a little bit more patience, urgency, and timing to make the ability work. As for her passive ability of the spacewalk, this is what gives her that slippery feel that is extremely useful to take less damage as you maneuver in and out of fights and around in the air. Horizon is going to take a fairly coordinated or experienced player to make the most of her abilities, but those who master Horizon can truly unlock another level of skill in Apex. It also goes without saying that for general power, Horizon is really solid in both pubs and ranked and at all levels of skill. I flip-flopped a bit as to where to put Season 9's Valkyrie, but I decided to drop her down one tier into the straight S tier and not all the way down to A tier. This does make Valkyrie a very small percentage less useful or needed than the previous seasons. To start though, I dropped Valkyrie down that one spot because I do think the new survival slot item of the evac tower, it's going to make her a little less needed when it comes to rotations. And this was also reinforced directly to me by the dev team. Not to mention, the smaller maps this season also make Valkyrie a little bit less of a must-have legend, as you don't need that mega rotation to fly over a mountain like you would on Stormpoint or even Broken Moon. Still though, Valkyrie has that passive of literal flying to make aggressive combat plays, a tactical to force movement and open opportunities, and an ultimate with the Skyward Dive that isn't locked into an item. Her ultimate also goes higher and has a little bit more safety when using, since it can't be destroyed like the tower. Valkyrie still remains an insane pick and worthy of a spot on any squad, but if you are looking to branch out a little bit, there are some other options. This season, we only have one legend getting slotted in the S+ tier or the God tier spot, and for me, and it may be surprising to some, but it is going to be Newcastle. Newcastle, in my eyes, is almost like the Season 0 to Season 3 Gibraltar, where he isn't that fun to play for most people, but his usefulness is just so high that I can't not put him on the top of the list. For starters, the Ultimate Castle Wall lets you not only leap massive distances to the team to revive them or support them, but his power to also get a quick hop to height to angle off enemies is pretty insane. Newcastle's passive ability is literally one of the most busted revive mechanics in the game, as moving a player and covering them at the same time means you can better reset a fight. If this is not enough, a tactical mobile shield before you start that revive also means the newly revived player has additional protection to fully reset their health. There really isn't much that Newcastle can't do, but be sure to check out this video right here for the best weapons you can use with your legend. Thanks for watching, hit that like button, sub for more, and I'll see you in the next one.